Hello everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to yet another stimulating CMO Hot Topics Roundtable. Today's theme is Back to the Future. So we're going to be looking at how we as senior marketers future-proof our roles. We're also going to be taking a look back to days when we didn't necessarily have the exciting tech tools that we now have at our fingertips. I'd like to kick off with the here and now, and I'm going to ask you first off, Mark. What's the biggest challenge that you're currently facing?
The biggest challenge, I think, for me and my team, I think, is just the pace of change. I look at it, I guess, through three ways. The relationship we have with the business, the demands are more, I think the expectations are more and continually growing, so that's constantly changing and morphing as we develop and grow. I think the demands from technology, there's so much to incorporate into what we're doing, the right technology to use and again what the outcomes of that are. And then I guess the customer demands more from us, demands more to know from us, from thought leadership right the way down to pricing and proposal. So constantly changing, I guess, and that keeps us all moving fast.
Scott, is it the same for you? All about the customer challenge or different?
So the customer, obviously, that's where we start. So are we giving them the best experience that they've ever had? So we're always focusing on that, especially around how we personalise to them without going too far that it feels sort of creepy in that perspective. So we think very hard on that improved customer experience. We're very lucky now in today where we've got tech and tools that can help us do that. I think I'd love it if we stopped talking about digital marketing and just said marketing, because digital just plays a big part and there's no such thing as digital marketing and then you do the other marketing stuff on the side. Biggest challenge really within the business over the last couple of years with Microsoft has actually just been, like Mark said, the pace of change, but not just bringing technology in for technology's sake. I'm very lucky, we have a great tool set within Microsoft that I can call upon, but if you don't bring the processes with you and also your people, not just in terms of them buying into where you're going, but also the skills they need in order to be much more of a modern marketeer, then that's where you can fall up. So I've really focused hard on people, processes, and the tech. And that's when I go and speak to customers, a lot of the challenge that they're finding as well, so we're trying to help them do that.
Thank you. Shalu, you've moved from corporate world to startup. I appreciate you're in a very, very new role, 3 days in now. What's your biggest current challenge?
I would say it would be the whole thing around data. There's such a deluge of data at the moment and it's become very trendy to have data scientists on board that can build, propensity to purchase models. And, for me, it's the blend between the art and science of marketing and being in a startup environment, you're incredibly agile. I no longer have to seek permission to get a campaign out or, seek brand approval. So it's fantastic, but it just means that, you're able to execute, literally the next day and go live with something. And to Scott's point, digital marketing, I'll just talk about marketing, we are at the mercy of everything that happens in that space. And when you think about global versus field or localized versus standardized, no longer do we think about global campaigns, because something that could happen on a local perspective suddenly becomes global news, and that's all down to the power of digital. So again, it's also looking at that aspect of it, and then adding on top of that the whole concept around revenue marketing, because I think now 25% of CMOs are responsible for generating the company plan around revenue and growth strategies. So that now also adds another volume, and in a startup mode, you really are at the forefront of driving and owning a number.
Thanks. Catherine, how does it work at Facebook Workplace?
So I think the biggest challenge for us, for me, my team at the moment, is just one of prioritization. So Workplace is a new business within Facebook. It's a startup within the big startup. It's a new product in the enterprise. So I think the opportunity for us is huge, which is the amazing challenge, but also the big challenge when it comes to deciding, where to focus for greatest impact. So I think ruthless prioritization is a term we use, and my take on ruthless prioritization and why it's so challenging is that you have to not do things that you really, really want to do. So, we're in a situation where there's probably 20 things we know we could and should do as a marketing team, but we're trying to focus on the ones that will deliver greatest impact. So you're having to sort of trade off things that you really would love to do or you really know are needed. So things like really zoning in on our target audience, the channels that will be most effective, the markets that are most kind of optimum for us at the moment. So making some really big and tough trade-offs is definitely a challenge every day.
Louise, I know you also have a view on the sort of trade-off between traditional revenue-based marketing versus the altruistic piece. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So I think one of the challenges that I'm facing is sort of an age-old challenge as well, which is how do I split my budget between putting it into existing tactics that we know tried and tested, you have ROI on, and the tactics that are going to be future-proofing the business, but you don't have the evidence base yet. And what we're seeing with a lot of our customers is that their buying habits are evolving. So, we saw it move from features to benefits to brand awareness. And now I'm seeing an evolution in brand awareness. And they're saying to us that we also want to know, what's your conscience? What's your purpose? What's your ecosystem? What other value can you bring to us? And that's quite altruistic. So it's how much of my budget do I invest there and how much of the talent there and how much do you put into the traditional marketing tactics?
Okay, so building on that, how do you think, and I'm going to continue with you if I may, Louise, how do you think we future-proof our roles as CMOs?
I think we constantly have to be looking at how things are evolving. So my team within the planning cycle, we're looking every 6 months to say, in a couple of years' time, what are things going to look like? Constantly looking at the market. So Gartner, for example, talk about moving from information authority to an information connector, and how do we manage that? What does that team look like? What are the skills going to be needed? So it's always getting the new thinking in.
Building on that, Shalou, new thinking, art and science still, how do we future-proof our roles?
If we look at what we have available to us, and now we're looking at intent data, never before have we had so much insight into a prospect. We really literally, can do some progressive profiling and almost, understand what they're about to do before they actually even do it. So for me, it's all about just making sure that we know how to use the tools and the data, because we've got access to an abundance amount of data right now, but how to be effective with it is probably going to be the challenge. And then the other aspect of it is nurturing the talent of the future. So I'm a huge advocate of bringing in interns into the company, but actually there's a really interesting role reversal when you bring in someone like an intern, especially for someone like me, whereby they come in socially baked. So that skill set you immediately recruit when you bring in an intern, and what they get in return is the years of coaching and mentoring that we're able to offer. So for me, that almost becomes the stamp of how we future-proof our roles.
I've got a lot of interns and apprentices in my team at Microsoft, and I always learn at least one thing when I have a meeting with them. Always, always, always. And it's that thing of the most senior person is not always the one who's teaching nowadays, for sure.
It's interesting, and I think certainly in my experience, many of our recruitment strategies are changing dramatically on the basis of it, because we weren't born in the digital world, most of us, although I agree with you. Get rid of the word digital marketing. Yes. Talking about future-proofing our roles, Mark, I love your view of the fact that part of future-proofing our roles is seeing ourselves anyway already as the most valuable asset in our businesses. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think everybody's touched on the role of marketing and how it's changing. I think I talk more about us as a business asset now. I like the idea of the ownership we have now around budget and business strategy. It's much more front-facing now. I think the biggest future value I think marketing has is that relationship. There's that fundamental traditional alignment to the number of leads we have to pass into the business. But I think, and we've touched on this a few times, the value of us understanding more pre-lead, almost that prospect, the journey that customers are on, the way they're interacting with marketing materials, et cetera, to give us more of the value of time in this process, because that traditional BANT qualified lead, I think the time piece has changed enormously. And someone going on a journey, so much of what we do at Rackspace is around understanding customers' problems. And there's an element of time that you have to engage with, the right time, if you like, to have those conversations. So for us, it's a lot about the value we play in that entire journey, and much more investment now is spent on the prospects as opposed to the, as they walk through the door, so to speak. So interesting, yeah.
Great, thank you. Catherine, over to you. How do we future-proof our roles?
I think first and foremost, not worrying about future-proofing your role, because you might end up redundant or needing to move on if you've done a good enough job at improving the value of marketing to the business. So I think maybe not being concerned with the future-proofing and more being concerned with embracing the growth and change that is just a reality of what we're all doing. So But I think I love the concept of growth mindset, so always looking to learn. Most marketers are naturally curious, so we're here to learn, we're evolving as the technology and the customers evolve. So I think future proofing for me is more about like always having that desire to learn, embracing all the change that comes and the technology that comes, and then really like maintaining this unshakable belief in the value of marketing to businesses, and obviously the drive to prove that is really important. But like you say, if we are really owning the commercial value of what we're doing and producing, then marketing and therefore the CMO are going to be functions that are preserved when maybe other things are being changed.
Let's hope so. Time will
Fingers
tell.
crossed.
Scott, should we care about future-proofing our roles?
I wouldn't get too hung up about personally future-proofing the role you do today, because if I think about the type of people I hire now versus even 5 years ago, they're different. So I think our roles will evolve. I think the big thing that we need to be careful of as marketeers and leaders is transformation is exciting, but transformation is hard. And the problem with transformation is you get very internally focused very quickly. What tools do I need? What process I need? Am I hiring the right people? Are my stakeholders happy? And that's important. But what I think is also important as well is showing that you're adding value externally as well. So I spend more time with customers than I ever have done, and that's because the sales teams want me to, because we've got a story to tell about how we're modernising marketing, and our customers want to hear that. So therefore, try to, what I say, take the human out of the marketing department rather than just the activity, and use those humans who have the experience within the team to also be external facing and add value to the sales cycle. And then I think that generally you will get seen as being more impactful to the business rather than just being seen as the marketing department.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the human element is often forgotten about when we get so wrapped up in our various BI dashboards and the tech tools at our fingertips. Louise, how do you see it? Is it all about the external versus internal juggling piece?
I think it's, Scott made a very good point. It's about sort of what the customer needs and what your business needs to grow around that. So if I look at my team, for example, I have a lot more technical people in the team than I ever have done before to process the data and to give us the information. But it's also around building those relationships. So if you're building a deep relationship with the customer, they have to know you face to face, you have to have that. And it's what you mentioned at the beginning, which is there is no substitute for the face-to-face side of things. So my team will look very different probably in a year's time from now. And I'm interested to see, will it look more technical? Will we have gone back to people who are just much more around relationship building? And I think it's always taking in the data points, what the customer's asking for.
It's interesting because I think the onus is very much on us to make sure that we are reassessing the skills and expertise within our team to make sure that we are absolutely keeping up with changing customer requirements. Slightly different tack now. So I think one of our many challenges, even as senior marketers, is marketing. So the internal piece of proving our worth, proving exactly how we're adding profitable value to the bottom line. Whom do we see as the best internal sponsors of marketing? And Shallow, I'm going to start with you there.
Sure. So for me, I'd say there's probably three key groups that I would associate with. One is the CIO. And the reason being is that the CIO can actually bring the CMO's vision to fruition, especially when you look at the technology stack that we have available to us. But also the CIO could be an advocate when you need to get the budget from the CFO. So if you have that relationship in place, for me, I think that's a key sponsor. Second one is, and this might be an unusual one, but the CTO, especially when you work in a technology company whereby we're all saying the same thing. If you took all our logos, away, we pretty much sound like everyone else in our field or in our space. So when we do relate or connect with the CTO and bring them in early on in terms of content and messaging, you end up with a hybrid piece of relevance. And that actually for me is really critical. And then the third one is the wider community within the company. So before we ever launch a campaign, we actually present it to the whole of the organisation to get feedback from sales and also the engineers. And it's that insight and feedback that we get, although we don't really want it, but it actually drives a better campaign. because I could look at something and see something completely different, but someone with a different set of eyes will see something that is so obvious that we should have taken it on board. So for me, I think those three are critical audiences internally.
So Mark, I know at Rackspace you also have a view that the CIO and CTO are really important brand ambassadors for you. Who else do you see as an important internal sponsor?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with how that conversation started. Almost there's table stakes, I think, with sales relationships, finance relationships, with budgets and things. Increasingly, it's the relationship with the people that front the technology. So I love the conversation you had about the CTO and the CIO. Just getting these people, Rackspace is full of technologists, thousands of them. So really, if I can get those guys in front of customers and prospects, becomes increasingly valuable. So they're really the future of how I think I address the market, and arguably the best internal sponsors I've got.
Catherine, what about at Facebook Workplace?
I think we always say, in marketing that our customers will tell the story better than we could ever tell it ourselves. And I think the same is true for your internal customers and stakeholders. So first and foremost, the people who are owning the commercial targets for the business or the company or the part of the business that you support. So that's something that, I try and make sure I'm extremely aligned with the people who within Facebook are leading the workplace business and also product. We've talked about finance and IT. Obviously, if you've proven your value, if you've got finance and IT on side, you've obviously done a good job of proving the worth of marketing. And I would add also that in a product-led or product-driven organization, which obviously Facebook is, the leaders and the owners, the people who are building the product, being close partners with them, showing that you share their vision for where the product can go and where it can build to, and that you can find new ways and new customers for that product and lead that kind of vision is also really key. So product and business owners, I think, would be the two key ones for me.
Thank you. Scott, you've certainly said in the past that the past sort of 2 to 3 years, you've seen sales leaders and particularly smart salespeople as being really, really key bedfellows. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think we talk about connecting sales and marketing, and Mark says it's table stakes, and it isn't on the spec, but that doesn't mean it's easy to do. So we've had to work really hard on embedding ourselves into the sales team and having the conversations that they want to have. I think one of the sales guys said to me once, finally feels like marketing's not being pushed on me now, it's being useful for me. And I think that's a really good statement of, we've gone in, we've understood their business. I always talk to my guys about, and the rest of the team around, do you understand how a salesperson works, how they're paid, what their focus is, what their pressures are as well? Because if you don't, you're never going to be on the same page as them. So we've worked really hard in connecting the sales bit. Also with finance as well, I spent a lot of time with the finance team on working with them, because finance people aren't just about counting the budget and the numbers. They do have some really good insights about how to spend the money in the right places. So I've talked a lot about what does it mean to use money to do reputation building stuff? What does it mean to do demand generation stuff? What does it mean to enable the sales team? So working with them so that they understand when we're trying to spend money here, here or here, what that means, how we're going to measure it, because ROI is different depending on them. And then the last bit is we've done a lot of work on stakeholders from across the business. So for example, we're doing a lot of work around AI at the moment. Microsoft has a really strong AI solution and proposition. We have a lot of people that are coming net new into the company, and we've got a lot of people that understand AI across the company. So we're going and finding those people and bringing them in to be part of the team that then takes the AI story to market, obviously working with our core team as well. So sometimes it's about picking individuals, no matter what their role is or how many years they've been in the business, to help you with some of the marketing that you're doing.
I like that, the concept of gathering different expertise, certainly as internal brand ambassadors, to tell our stories on our behalf. Louise, how do we make sure that people internally don't feel that marketing is just something being done to them? How can they help sell our story?
Well, interesting. I mean, I think I have a very similar experience to Scott, but we've actually just restructured our business over the last year in order to align marketing, sales, product marketing and the solutions team to the same goals and the campaigns. So we all have the same targets and we all run the same campaigns and take different parts of it. So it's a continuous journey. And what we're finding with that is when we have the customer touch points, we are all saying the same thing. So it's not marketing pulling people in and sales saying, well, I don't really know about that, let's talk about this. It's much more of a fluid thing. So the people inside the company are now saying, well, we want to be part of that. That sounds quite exciting. Which part can we take?
Great, thank you. Shallow, totally different question for you. as we look to doing things differently in the future, how do we stay disruptive, and what's the most disruptive piece of work you've ever delivered on?
The most disruptive piece was a campaign called Hug a Hacker. I worked for a cybersecurity company, and it was, we wanted to do something slightly different from what everyone else was doing in the space, which was talking about, the products, the features, the benefits, etc. So we thought, well, let's come up with an emotive campaign around Hug a Hacker. And the reason why it was so disruptive was because everyone had an opinion on it. And as part of internally trying to make sure that we got natural ambassadors that would amplify the campaign, we shared it internally. And the feedback that we got actually helped us evolve the campaign. But what was really interesting about this campaign was that we allowed the last mile to be touched by the field. And that didn't just include the marketers, it was the salespeople as well. So we created things, like even, stuff like email signatures that were branded around the campaign as well. And even when the campaign came to an end, people just didn't want to give up on the salespeople just didn't want to give up on their email signatures. So we had to keep the landing page alive, which, typically when the campaign's ended, you sort of like take down the landing page. So it was disruptive because, we had to sell the concept to, my stakeholders and my executive team that were so used to seeing a serious campaign coming out. And suddenly we were going down this completely different route of Hug a Hacker.
I love the concept, Hug a Hacker. Brings a much more emotional slant to more traditional feature benefit advertising and marketing activity. Scott, talk me through the example that you cited at 3GSM, because that, I think, was also all about making sure that you were getting colleagues really, really excited about the activity and the stands that you were delivering on.
Yeah, I mean, with Microsoft, I've been very lucky to work on a lot of creative campaigns, so I didn't want to pull out a creative campaign per se. So I refer to when I was working at Logica, and you know Logica very well. So what I'd say, quite a traditional organisation that is quite risk averse in terms of the marketing that they'd want to do. And we wanted to go and really make a big splash at 3GSM World Congress, biggest telco show of the year. Logica playing a very big role within the telco sector. So we started off with a double-decker stand, and it's not so much that there was lots of creative ideas coming from all the agencies, but it was about bringing employees around, showing up differently at an event like you never have done before, have it much more experiential, so it wasn't just your normal turn up, there's people with polo shirts on handing out brochures. It was just a demo-orientated stand. They were flat screens. You had to come onto the stand to see what was really happening. We had stuff going on throughout the event, dance acts, comedy acts, etc., trying to pull people to the stand as well, and just try to go with a different way of messaging to our customers like we never have done before. And that can be a bit Marmite sometimes, but actually it worked really, really well. Not just that we got different types of people coming to the stand, so different sort of opportunities and leads generated, but employees that were motivated for the whole 4 days, and also then beyond there as well, around how marketing can help and can be a bit different, rather than another boring trade show that many of us have been to over the years. So I felt quite proud of that, alongside some of the really creative stuff we've done with Microsoft.
No, it's lovely, and I think the idea that any activity or programme can have a level of both internal and external longevity is a real measure of success. Catherine, most disruptive work you've ever delivered?
So disruptive work, it's not on the Nike spectrum now. We've obviously seen some amazing disruptive work from other areas of the industry in the last few weeks. But so Workplace, as I said, is a new product for Facebook. It's our first entry into, I guess, enterprise marketing and the enterprise and software as a service. So as a marketing team, we're trying a lot of tactics that in other companies, probably for people around this table, are really kind of table stakes and kind of permanent fixtures on marketing plans. So one example from this year is we did our first airport advertising campaign. So we had launched all of our digital channels, and then really trying to capitalize on the insight that Workplace as a product is really differentiated by being a tool that leaders can use and that can really connect everybody in an organization. So a lot of collaboration tools are maybe used by certain teams, but Workplace is flourishing in organizations like Walmart and Heineken and Virgin Atlantic because leaders are embracing it, and also people who have never had an email address can also embrace it. So on the insight that we wanted to target leaders, we chose airports, and we did a campaign that It was disruptive just in that it looked very different to other campaigns that live in that environment. We deliberately threw out our brand palette, which is blue and grey. We love using images of our customers. We decided not to do that in this instance, which was a bit risky because it's kind of the standard in that environment. And we used our product UI, we used our bright colours, and we really tried to treat C-level executives as people. As Facebook, we understand people. So we ran a campaign that we called C-Level Superpowers. We ran it in Heathrow and London City and the US. And we saw double-digit growth in brand awareness and consideration for workplace among audiences who we have really low awareness had never heard of it before, and really gained traction with the C-level audience. So that was kind of disruptive for us, both in the media choice, but for the audience, I think the way we brought it to market was pretty disruptive. So we're trying to do enterprise marketing a little bit differently for workplace.
So it's not about the enterprise playbook anymore?
I think there's certain tactics in the playbook that are effective, and it's trying to take for us a Facebook approach to those tactics. So bringing a real understanding of people and obviously leveraging our own platforms is something we're doing too.
Great stuff. So in relation to the people piece, and of course we're all about targeting people, I know that the most disruptive campaign that you cite, Louise, is from former BT days, trying to get people excited about a concept that didn't really exist.
Yes, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the ecosystem, and it's really the first time that I saw this working properly. So I was lucky enough to be involved in launching broadband in the UK, and at the time no one really understood why we'd need to move from ADSL because it worked perfectly for us. And what BT did was say, okay, we have numerous different agencies. At the time I worked on the B2B PR, and they said, we'd like all of our agencies and our investor relations team to get into the room together and to come up with the one big idea and then to take different parts of it. So I remember sitting in this room with 26 different people with lots of different experience and sort of hammering this out. And then as we moved through the year, we all took different parts of the same campaign and brought it to life. And it was amazing working with loads of different people who you otherwise at that point wouldn't have had the exposure to. And that's something that I've been sort of able to take through now with my experience and look at how we bring in different things to different campaigns.
Thank you. So Louise talks about the ecosystem. Mark, I know one of your examples of disruptive work is moving from being in a very competitive landscape to looking at things from more of a sort of co-opetition basis. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, arguably it's the transition of Rackspace over the last 5 years. So the journey public cloud as a service has been on saw us years ago competing with the likes of Microsoft and Amazon in particular as a public cloud provider. And the reality was that to be successful and grow, we had to stop competing and become this managed service on top of them. So the disruption, I guess, was the relationship we had to reset with customers, which Rackspace has this theory of fanatical support. Support is around everything we do, the customer's in the middle of everything. So we had to reset that trust. You know, the people that we've been talking to you about offering a better service out, we can now work with them to provide you an equally good service. The relationship then we had with the likes of Microsoft and Amazon and Google, to reset the value in their eyes, and then ultimately internally. We had a team that were every day coming in looking to create a service that was comparable, in our view, to Microsoft and Amazon, and now we were asking them to go and add value on top of theirs. So the last 3-4 years has been probably as disruptive as I've ever had in my career, but all for the right reasons, I think. So yeah, it's challenging, but it's front and centre.
An exciting time. I think it's interesting, there's an ongoing conversation at the moment as to how we shift from how we used to think about sort of classic competitive advantage within business and move towards collaborative advantage. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes. I would like to look back, if I may, to the year 2000. So in the days when we were all worried that PCs everywhere would explode with Y2K, when I guess Tim Berners-Lee was at the sort of embryonic phase of his journey, when we as marketeers had email mainly internally, but certainly didn't have any of the tools that we have at our fingertips now. Catherine, if you only had the tools that you had in the year 2000, how would you deliver to customers and your ecosystem now?
So I started my marketing career in the year 2000, fresh out of college. You launched broadband for the first time. I was working at Vodafone back in Ireland, and we were working on launching picture messaging for the first time. Not a tool we had available to us as marketers. So I would love to say, because it was the same year as Google AdWords launched, that I was an early pioneer of Google AdWords. I was not. We probably didn't have a website to drive anybody to. But I think what digital has taught us and the evolution since, and something I would embrace if I was to go back to those tools now, is just the importance of a super relevant message for your target audience. Personalization could still be achieved with those tools. And I think the importance of a big idea that is consistent across your platforms, even if those are more limited than the plethora we have available to us today, would never be more important. So I think, given the audience, the business audience that I'm targeting today with Workplace, I think platforms like direct mail, I would still do the airport campaign because that was obviously available to us back then. And I think just a rigorous focus on the really targeted message in a very relevant way through all the touch points. And I did radio in college, so I would go big on radio ads.
Love it. Mark, how would you tackle it now?
Yeah, I think you approached that fabulously. And it all comes down to face-to-face for me. So an event strategy of some perspective, I think it will be more. Scott talked about trade shows of the past. My career started, late 90s with catalogue marketing. But when I think about whether you could get them on the phone, it was all about how do we get face-to-face with the bigger ones. So as advanced as technology goes, as much as we're using data and prospecting and trying to get smarter in front of them, nothing is as powerful for me as face-to-face time with customers. So I would probably stick with the investment and energy into that and have an ear into the future of email as it would have been back then. Yeah.
Louise, is it all about face-to-face or other?
It's interesting. I agree with you. You've taken me back to the days when I used to have to print off the the press releases, staple them, and then jump in my car to take them to the post box. But a lot of the time, we were out and about a lot more. So we were at networking events. We saw the customer a lot more. When we spoke to journalists, we went over, we demonstrated things. And I think with the digital era, we ended up in the office a bit more. And now we're seeing a shift back to remembering that actually those relationships are absolutely crucial.
Scott,
Yeah.
looking at different data sources, very, very different data sources then to what we have at our fingertips now, how would you tackle it?
It's interesting. We sometimes complain about we've got too much data now. We would love to have had that back in 2000 for sure. I think one of my learnings from way back then is that I didn't really use every data source that was available to me. So my biggest data source used to be the salesperson's opinion. And I wish I was a bit more bolshy around ideas I had. And although I didn't always have the backup of data to prove it, I often would step down if a salesperson had an opinion of we should do it this way rather than that way as well. So I would go back, I would look at more data sources to then give me the insight that I'd need to make decisions rather than just sort of maybe using one or two individuals' opinion because they were the most senior or they were the most customer facing. I think as well, we were in a real habit in those days of just doing spray and pray in terms of DM and just marketing in general. So I would also be a bit more specific about targeted audiences, who you're going after, and not just going out and buying endless lists just because you could. Never then used to promise the gold that they used to say they would. So definitely maybe not having the tools we have today, but there is still opportunity to grab data from lots of different areas and get better insight than to do much more targeted campaigns.
Thank you.
It does back up, I think, everything that we're hearing around making sure that the relationships with customers, the relationships with peers and internally are all working properly, because I think without that, we struggle in today's environment.
I think some things are making a comeback. So we talked about radio advertising. That's as effective now as it was 15 years ago. So it's not like everything in 2000 was bad. There's a lot of things that still have stood the test of time for sure.
Yeah. Outdoor and TV continue to evolve with technology.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I know from my own experience, the advent of digital out of home as well has seriously changed the landscape on that front in terms of hyperlocal targeting, geolocation and so on. Final question for you this morning is, I'm going to start with you, Scott. What 3 things are you most excited about at the moment, apart from your new role?
Oh, of course, yeah. First of all, as marketers, we're in a position where it's ours to lose now, whereas often previous years you would always be trying to prove yourself, your effectiveness to the business. But I think we're now at the table with all the stakeholders, which I think is really important. I think what excites me as well is that we have an opportunity with AI and machine learning to really be as effective as we ever have been. I call AI and machine learning our new partner, essentially. But you can't, AI and machine learning won't do it all for you. You've got to have that human alongside interpreting and utilising what that's serving up for you. But with AI and machine learning, I think, well, first of all, we can be as effective as ever in the jobs that we're doing, which I think is great. But also we can deliver the best customer experiences we ever have done. And if we say customer is at the heart of everything we do, which we do as marketeers, that's really, really exciting for me. And actually the exciting bit is a bit of the unknown, is what is to come as marketeers. If I think about my job now compared to 5 years ago, whether that's a senior marketeer or somebody who was coming through the marketing ranks, it's changed a lot, and I see it changing even more, but in an exciting way, because, as I said earlier, transformation for me is exciting. It might be hard, but it's really, really exciting.
I think we probably all agree with that. Transformation is very hard, but super exciting. Shallow, what are you excited about?
Well, I am excited about joining Starleaf, which I've just done 2 days in, for a number of reasons. I love building teams, and I love building and inheriting talent. And for me, so it's really exciting to sort of like, you know, join another team, because there's a lot of learnings. But we're also constantly at the cusp of change, which is fantastic. And again, at Starleaf, you know, owning inside sales or the BDR function is just so exciting as a marketeer, because you don't just own a portion or influence a portion of the waterfall funnel. You know, you literally have got a lead or a prospect from conception through to fruition, which is incredibly exciting. And then that also just plays back into the whole concept around revenue marketing and being able to actually own a number and have further influence within an organisation.
Good stuff, thank you. Louise, you're excited about the intelligence network.
I am, yes.
Talk us through it.
So it maps back to what I was talking about with the ecosystem. And we've just taken the plunge, and we have created an initiative that works with industry, government, academia, to look at future-proofing the digital society. And it's something that we're taking on issues that are maybe 5-10 years in advance. So something that government may not want to tackle because it's got a 4-year outlook. It's a challenge because on your own, you're being asked to put money and resource into something that you may not see deliver in the next 6 months. But I'm absolutely fascinated to see where it's going to go. And Microsoft actually sit on the steering committee with us as well. So I think it's going to be really good for the industry, and definitely one of these sort of the right thing to do and should add value to everyone involved. The second thing I'm also looking forward to is just seeing the team evolve, and to your point, how we manage the data that we have. And we have the skills now within the team to bring that data to life for us. So what changes that involves, and then to your point, which is what else is coming our way to disrupt us that we're just not aware of yet.
Who knows what's around the corner? Catherine, what are you excited about?
There's 3 things I'm excited about. Just the opportunity ahead for workplace. As a marketer, there's no better challenge than, as I spoke about earlier, just knowing you have so much runway. We say at Facebook we're 1% done. Workplace, we might even be slightly less, but we have over 30,000 customers and a lot further to go. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. Second, in line with that, is just building the team. So we're hiring marketers in North America and in London also. So just building teams, bringing new talent on that we can learn from, hire people who are better than you is one of the catchphrases I like to live by. So doing more of that, I'm excited about. And then finally, if I'm allowed a non-marketing one, my favorite podcast, Serial, is back next week. So I'm very excited about Serial coming, and I expect to be addicted on my commute for the next month or so.
We all need distractions outside work. Mark, what are you excited about?
I think the first one would be data. From 2 angles. I think the data that we're receiving as marketeers and everything we do with it, I think we've all talked about that today, but also the way customers are interpreting data and understanding the challenges they have. They're our customers. So I love, to Scott's point, I visit and spend time with customers, and understanding data and the challenges that brings for fast-paced businesses. That's the game that we're in, so that's exciting. I think we've talked about talent. The next generation of marketeers. I love going back to the year 2000 as we did, talking about, you know, the old way we used to work. The people that I'm hiring today have nothing but social engagement and thought leadership at the front, social presence and footprints and networks. So I think it's changing the way we work and challenging some of that traditional marketing that we've been good at for so long. And the final one I think is social media, full stop. Going back to my point earlier around prospecting and how valuable that becomes, the network of people's engagements, what they have opinions on, what they believe in, their points of view, helps me so much in fueling the work we do, but also understanding what makes customers tick. And Scott made a good point earlier about this isn't going to customers saying, I know where you've been, I know what you're doing, but it shapes the way we think and the way we communicate. So I think those three things for me.